Warning: the gameplay presented in this video is from a series of violent horror games, so viewer discretion is advised. This video will also have spoilers for Until Dawn, Man of Medan, Little Hope, The Quarry, and House of Ashes. I didn't really know what to expect going into House of Ashes, except for the fact that you'd be playing as soldiers in some underground ruins, and the fact that I'd be cutting a rope at some point. Thanks, Little Hope. I also went in knowing that the fans of the Dark Pictures Anthology series, or DPA for short, generally considered this one as the best. As someone who has yet to play The Devil in Me, I am inclined to agree. But before I tell you why, those of you who have seen the previous entries of this series know how it goes by now. In the interest of fairness, before I heap praise onto this game, I need a moment to discuss the aspects that aren't so great. Might as well start with the obvious. House of Ashes is the most janky game of the series so far. Man of Medan had the occasional pop-in, and Little Hope had some movement glitches and the odd crash, but House of Ashes takes it to a whole new level. Pop-in can be found everywhere, and I honest to God had a moment where I was playing the climax of the game and Jason got replaced with Salim, who had died earlier in that run. Sure, I didn't encounter anything game-breaking and had no hard crashes, but the severity has been swapped out for consistency. House of Ashes also abandons the positive experimentation offered by Man of Medan and Little Hope. I can forgive having a less emotionally charged story like that of Little Hope, but the way it fails to implement Man of Medan's greatest strength is a little more baffling. My second biggest regret with my Man of Medan video, after not recording my own footage, is that I did not give nearly enough praise for just how adaptive its narrative was. There were no set roles, you could kill anyone you wanted and the game would just switch the characters around. House of Ashes abandons this philosophy almost entirely. Let me give you an example. This is Nick. Nick is okay. Despite all the deadly situations that Nick can find himself in throughout this 24-chapter story, he cannot die until the Vault, the 21st chapter. Okay, so one character can't die until near the end. Big deal. Oh no, I'm not done. This is Jason. Jason is either the second best or second worst character depending on how you play him. This is Salim, the best character and a man I would take a bullet for. These guys can't die until Semper Fi, the 22nd chapter, after Nick's first death opportunity. The primary draw of an interactive horror story in the vein of Supermassive's catalogue is that any character can live or die on your decisions. When more than half of your roster is guaranteed safe passage until near the end of the game, it means that you can make as many terrible decisions as you'd like with these characters, and it won't mean a thing. There's even a better example of a more balanced potential death list in Rachel. This is Rachel. Rachel's okay. Rachel's first death opportunity is in The Assault, the 13th chapter. She also has a wider variety of deaths. While Nick, Jason and Salim can only be roughed up by vampires, Rachel can be blown up by her own squad's mines, shot, burnt to a crisp by white phosphorus, or in the new most disturbing fate of the entire DPA, left trapped in a cocoon full of goo that keeps you in stasis, alive and aware. Forever! This is Eric. Eric sucks. He's obnoxious, entitled, and literally leaves his own squad mate for dead if you play your cards wrong. Alright, I mean, this is kind of a cool outcome.
Is it Nick? Just a ghost contact.
Luckily, Eric is the easiest to kill, and you have the earliest opportunity to do so. In the game's 7th chapter, the 1/4 mark, you can refuse to cut the rope and have him get shot or slip to be impaled on the jagged rocks below. And the death opportunities keep on coming. The reason I prefer this over how the game handles the rest of the squad is that these two characters actually need to be handled with care if you want to keep them alive. As such, keeping them alive is far more tense and engaging. Lastly, my first playthrough of House of Ashes had an uncanny feel at the start, facilitated by the reuse of older models. Like, you've probably noticed by now that Nick is just Alex from Man of Medan, but it goes deeper than that. At the very start of the game, Eric introduces us to his assistant, Clarice, and oh, that's Taylor from Little Hope. We get introduced to the team's technician, Merwin, who's Danny from Man of Medan. There's Joey, who's Daniel from Little Hope, and also one of the soldiers from the Man of Medan prologue I've learned fairly recently. I'm pretty sure this corpse is reused from Man of Medan and... John, no! But those are all my gripes with House of Ashes, and while I have been on them for a while, this is nothing compared to my praise for what the game gets right. While House of Ashes certainly has arbitrary survival, what it does not have is arbitrary death. Every single character's death has a clear cause and effect that is almost immediately apparent. Did Eric get devoured by Clarice? Should have left her behind. Did Nick get his insides turned into outsides by a great hulking beast? Should have kept calm. Did Rachel get shot in the head after asking Jason to shoot her in the head? Don't ask Jason to shoot you in the head. Plus, while House of Ashes has one bottleneck, or one moment where a character in a deadly situation will automatically survive, this one bottleneck does make sense in context. The game will naturally ensure that you always have at least 2 characters make it to the surface by giving them enough time to escape a vampire ambush if you have fewer than 3. This point is slightly diminished by the fact that you have to intentionally kill characters off to make this happen, but it's still better than Little Hope's "you live because I say so" approach. While House of Ashes does leave behind the adaptive storytelling of Man of Medan, it does some experimentation of its own with an injury system. It may not seem like much, but for every DPA game and Until Dawn, characters have only ever been able to exist in one of 2 states, alive or dead. Yes, it was possible for Sam to get injured in Until Dawn, and for that injury to come back to haunt her, but that situation was very context dependent, while the injury system in House of Ashes is more of a mechanic. Every character but Rachel can get injured if they fail QTEs or make poor decisions. Nick is guaranteed to get injured, but he also finds an item that can mend an injury, so it is possible to end the game with no lingering injuries at all. There's even an achievement for it. Now, the implementation is a little lackluster. Whether or not Nick is injured will only determine how much difficulty he will have navigating the vault, and other characters' injuries will only come into play if Nick chooses to advance in the vault, survives, and doesn't get left for dead by Eric. I likely wouldn't have even brought this up, but the dichotomy of alive, dead, or injured in House of Ashes has since evolved into the dichotomy of alive, dead, or infected in The Quarry. So even if the implementation isn't great, this is still the first step towards a much better system. House of Ashes fixes just about all my petty gripes with Man of Medan. The post-game interrogations are excellent in their execution, arguably better than Until Dawn's. If a character has died, you see their body and these 2 discuss their death.
You sure you want to see the wounds?
I'll take your word for it.
Buddy? It's a head wound. You can already see it. If a character is alive, they are being interrogated and trying to communicate what they have experienced with a disbelieving interrogator.
No, I'm done. I told you already. It was a city, a goddamn city full of those things.
There are even neat exceptions, like if you didn't call in air support and Salim was the sole survivor of Daylight, he runs away before the military can catch him.
By the time the extraction team got here, he was gone. Could be across the border by now.
Sneaky son of a bitch.
Or if Rachel was cocooned and no one made it out to tell the tale, she's lost forever.
Rachel King. Why don't I see her here?
The analysis team couldn't find her.
She's dead then.
Almost certainly.
Again, this is genuinely nightmarish. This guy has been half ahead for thousands of years. The premonitions are actually really good. Sure, there are a few duds, but a couple of them present rare cutscenes that I still don't quite know how to trigger in-game. And the rest are just really helpful. Fallen is a genuine warning against not cutting the rope as Eric. Tripwire warns you to pay attention to where you set up the tripwires as Jason, and adds some tension to the moment where Nick calls ahead to warn his squad about them. Thirst is a warning against advancing in the vault, even though you can technically survive doing it, and Comrades encourages the best decision in the game, but I'm getting ahead of myself. These aren't even all of the useful premonitions, they're just the best ones. What was frustrating about the premonitions in Man of Medan and A Little Hope is that the effort to find them was not worth the foresight you got as a reward. House of Ashes, on the other hand, makes this a collectible worth going out of your way for. Speaking of flexing on the DPA, the House of Ashes prologue actually makes a pretty neat difference to the rest of the game. In Man of Medan, the prologue only determined where certain corpses would be placed. In A Little Hope, on top of added narrative significance, you would only determine which of two demons would be chasing Taylor. But in House of Ashes, not only does the prologue set up some of the themes of the wider game, but the last of your two characters to be attacked will return as the big bad of the game. The first to be attacked will return as this poor bastard. House of Ashes also sheds the ongoing issue with the DPA games having kind of lackluster climaxes. The final set piece has all the thrilling intensity of Until Dawn. Every surviving character has to hold up in a farmhouse while beset by vampires. And even the Ancient One makes an appearance if you didn't deal with him earlier. Unlike Man of Medan, where you could only kill one character during the climax, House of Ashes gives you control of everyone, and they all have several opportunities to die at the very end. There's even an achievement for having the full cast die here. The game can get a little confused if you only have two survivors and one of them gets killed off early, but besides that, this is an A+ climax. It even fixes some issues from the previous games that hadn't even occurred to me. Since the don't move mechanic from Until Dawn was specific to the PlayStation's DualSense controllers, a new gimmick mechanic was needed for the DPA games that were going to be released on other platforms. The solution was a keep calm rhythm minigame, where you must press the button as the heart rate monitor snippets cross the line. Since the first two games were primarily based on hallucinations, the idea that you needed to keep quiet felt kind of tacked on. However, the monsters in House of Ashes use sonar like ordinary bats, so keeping quiet seems more appropriate, even if they still aren't quite as tense as the don't move segments from Until Dawn. Those of you who haven't played House of Ashes may have inferred from the last point and other points in the video that this game actually has a real monster. And what's more, it also contains a big twist. One of my significant criticisms of Man of Medan is that the story is stagnant. You already know what's happening at the start and spend the game waiting for the characters to catch on. But House of Ashes doesn't do that. You realise pretty early on that you're dealing with vampires. These large bat-looking creatures can infect humans and are weak to sunlight. Salim even uses the word vampire at one point, in case you're a little slow to catch on. But there are hints that there is more to them. If you manage to help Nick and Salim kill one, Eric will notice that their teeth appear to be a mutation of some kind, actively fighting against the construction of their skulls. When you meet your first human vampire, you notice that they too have unnaturally jutting out teeth. This all comes to a head when Jason and Salim take an elevator deep underground and discover that these creatures aren't just vampires. They've been infected by the same vampiric parasite as some of your comrades. But if they haven't always been vampires, then what were they before? Aliens! Yes, I'm serious. I may not have come into House of Ashes with any expectations, but I certainly wasn't expecting a 2/3 remake of Vampires, Pirates and Aliens. Hey, wait a minute. On my first playthrough, I didn't like this. I thought that it was jumping the shark almost as a clapback to criticism about how predictable the DPA stories had been. But the more runs I completed, the more I noticed the small snippets of clues we got throughout the game in the secrets, cutscenes, and one particular environmental design choice. I realised that the alien reveal was very similar to the Wendigo one. You got small inklings that something more was happening, but ultimately couldn't have predicted where those clues were leading. But here we are again, comparing a Dark Pictures anthology game to its original predecessor. This brings us back to the question that inspired me to make that first video on Man of Medan. Does this game measure up to Until Dawn. Man of Medan didn't stand a chance. It had all the aspiration of an Until Dawn-like, with none of the execution that made it click. Little Hope had similar limitations, but decided to focus its effort on the story, and while ultimately surpassing Until Dawn in that regard, it fell short almost everywhere else. House of Ashes returns to those Until Dawn aspirations, but this time pulls them off spectacularly. It has a real monster with consistent mechanics, an evolving story that unravels engagingly, and even the little details like premonitions and post-game cutscenes are brought up to scratch. Sure, the vampires in House of Ashes aren't as visually striking or as mechanically terrifying as Until Dawn's Wendigos, and it even falls short of other DPA games in certain aspects. But as a whole experience, House of Ashes kind of, just barely, surpasses Until Dawn. I understand that's a contentious point, but hear me out. While most aspects it has in common with Until Dawn are either just slightly worse, like the monsters, just slightly better, like the ending cutscenes, or perfectly on par, like the narrative twist, House of Ashes has one aspect that pushes it over the line. A strong central theme explored through Supermassive's greatest character dynamic. House of Ashes contains a running conflict that the player has to decide how to resolve. I am, of course, speaking about the motif of enemies banding together to fight a greater threat, as explored in the character dynamic between Jason, the hot-headed American racist, and Salim, the idealistic Iraqi freedom fighter. This motif first appears in the game's prologue. After Balathu has faced the vampiric hordes, he has to team up with Karam, a man from another people who he very nearly executed. While these two working together is forced on the player at first, what you do get to decide is Balathu's attitude towards his situation. Does he abandon his bias in the face of this mortal threat, or does he cling to that bias and ultimately doom himself in the process? Towards the end of the prologue, you get to decide whether you will fight against Karam or alongside him. Depending on your attitude towards him up until this point, several things can happen, but the only way they will fight together is if Balathu lets go of his bigotry. This picks back up after the horror, when Jason and Salim are stuck together. While Salim already understands that working together is their only option, Jason still feels uneasy about this alliance. It doesn't matter what they're up against, Salim is still an enemy combatant, the exact kind of person Jason was sent here to destroy. There are two directions you can take Jason in. The first one I will discuss here is one in which he continues to hold these simple-minded beliefs and keeps Salim at arm's reach. Jason in this playthrough is what I imagine a typical chest-thumping obnoxious American is like. I wouldn't know for sure, I'm not from there, but this version of Jason does seem to line up with certain stereotypes. No matter how you approach Salim, he will eventually get separated from Jason and the other survivors after you detonate the C4 in the vault. You play as Jason during this moment, and all the other survivors will try to tell him that Salim is all but dead. Eric going so far as to say that Salim isn't one of them.
That man is not one of us.
In a playthrough where Jason keeps his limited mindset, when you get to the moment where he can save Salim or leave him for dead, you will likely choose the latter. I was furious with this branch. I remember deciding that the only fitting ending for a squad capable of this is an ending where none of them survive. So I put the controller down and watched as the lot of them succumbed to the same fate they left Salim to. This was when I got that weird glitch where Salim came back to life and took Jason's place. That kind of took the wind out of my revenge fantasy. But this is only one path you can take as Jason. There's another equally achievable path where he begins to see Salim as a person and becomes a more fleshed out character in the process. It turns out his hatred of Iraqis is little more than projection. He explains to Salim early on in their time together that the attack on the Twin Towers was his motivation for fighting. But if you allow him to open up, he later admits that on the day itself, he was stoned out of his mind and didn't even learn about the attack till a week later. The chest-thumping American bravado is a front a way for him to become the man his country expects him to be. But in working with an Iraqi combatant, getting to know him as more than just an enemy, and being forced to confront the horrors he has wrought on this country, he leaves the mask behind. So then we get back to this moment, where his squad mates are telling him to move on, and Eric tells Jason that Salim isn't one of them, and Jason says no.
You're wrong. Salim is one of us now. Marines don't leave their own behind. You hear me, Salim?
If I don't make that, tell my son I did everything I could.
Tell him yourself. I'm coming to get you.
He charges back into the abyss and saves his new brother-in-arms. This scene is excellent. I can see why some might take issue with its slightly jovial tone.
You seriously just throw that thing at me?
I did.
But this is a big moment for both of them. Jason had shed his biases to the point that he would risk his life to save someone he had just threatened to kill hours prior. And Salim is vindicated in his belief that they were all on the same team in the face of this deadly threat. Until Dawn doesn't really have this. Sure, Sam and Mike step up to the occasion and become great leaders during their crisis. Matt can potentially stand up to Emily if the player chooses to let him. Ashley can become so disillusioned that she lets her friend die. But nothing in that game comes close to the masterful setup and payoff or catharsis found in this scene. That's what just barely inches House of Ashes over the line. House of Ashes is a wild game. It can be a little off-putting with its reused models and odd narrative turn. It can be disheartening to see it step back from the advancements made in the previous Dark Picture anthology games. It can even be a little frustrating in its lack of mechanical fidelity. But as I place my thoughts and feelings into this script, as the tangents of my random thoughts combine into a cohesive analysis, I can't help but be impressed. House of Ashes ultimately pushes the overall quality of the series forward. It takes what made Until Dawn amazing and truly lives up to it. I can certainly see how it earned its reputation as the best in the Dark Pictures anthology series. Some of you might be wondering where this video essay series will go next. The Devil in Me is the next Dark Pictures anthology game, and one that I am very excited to play for the first time. But if chronology is to be maintained, then it's probably about time we made that long-awaited journey to Hackett's Quarry. I'd like to thank my patrons, Lars Espen, Data52, Pixcalibur, Eric Harrison, Jeremy Pashik, Fireclaw, Swiss Cage, Gerald, and Garen. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.